Good morning, I'm María and I will present our paper, How Do I Matter? A Review of Participatory Design Practice with Less Privileged Participants. So we conducted a literature review of participatory projects that involve less privileged participants, trying to understand how participation was unpacked through an analysis of the methods of involvement. Specifically, we were interested in less privileged participants as we thought that people who had been excluded or experienced some kind of disadvantage could feel less powerful and in so less likely to participate. So we reviewed 46 papers from 3 different venues, and these were analyzed using thematic coding. Now I will introduce some of our findings. So first, the involved participants. We observed that there were 8 main groups of participants. We need to know that we are not trying to frame participants in these groups as homogeneous in their needs and characteristics. Rather, we aimed at identifying tendencies in terms of participant selection, and this means that these are the groups that are perceived as less privileged in participatory projects currently. Also, in terms of involvement, there are tendencies that indicate that different groups of participants get involved in different stages of the design process, depending on the role they get to develop during this project, which at the same time is related to the conceptualizations researchers have about what participatory design means. In this sense, we found 3 different conceptualizations, but it's relevant to note that these were framed based on the activities and opportunities given to participants to influence the project, so they were not explicitly stated on the papers. The first one is participatory design as involvement in design activities. This is the most common approach to participation, and it basically means that individuals get involved by joining different design activities. It is a very broad and maybe loose understanding of participatory design because it assumes that by attending to design activities, then participants influence the project. In terms of roles, under these conceptualizations, participants can be informants if they are part of early-stage design activities, such as information gathering for problem definition. They can be partakers if they attend design activities related to problem framing, ideation, and validation, or they can be validators if they are part of just testing and giving feedback about an already existing project. Overall, with these roles, we observe it's usually not clear to what extent the engagement on these activities will influence the final design outcome. The second conceptualization promotes skills development as the first steps towards participation, understanding that in order to participate, people need the opportunity, but also capabilities, agency, and literacy about the topics that they will be working on. So participants hold the role of learners who develop their skills to increase their ability to participate. The third one is PD as a shared responsibility, in which participation is understood as a process where all the involved individuals, participants, stakeholders, and designers should have an equal influence in the project. And in this sense, their participants can exercise 2 roles. They can be research partners if they join data collection and research activities. So research is made with them and not only about them. And they also get to develop their research and analysis skills. Or they can be design partners if they are involved in all the stages of the design process and also get to influence research activities by sharing decisions about the tools and methods that will be applied. Having these conceptualizations in mind, we can see that shared responsibility is the least applied one. Also, with this study, we found some challenges faced by participants and researchers. So the first one was creating a shared understanding between people that is inherently different and has different life experiences. Also, leveraging participation skills and agency of groups of people that might not be used to exercise participation. And finally, maintaining their participation during the time that the project lasts was another challenge. Now, things that we need to discuss and reflect about. First, we have the matter of transparency and open communication. So the source that we reviewed had different levels of ambiguity about the project's process, and this ambiguity mainly manifests itself in these 5 different aspects. We know it's hard to refer to all this in one study, But then the question should be, okay, how can we facilitate transparency and communication to promote good practices in participatory design? Overall, this is more like a call to be engaged in a reflective process of what PD means today and how we're engaging less privileged participants from society. And we also think that when working, it's always relevant, but even more with less privileged participants, it's relevant to ask ourselves how the methods that we're applying ensure participants' influence, how these methods match the skills and needs of the participants, how the design processes are being framed, and also how participation influences the design outcome as well as participants' lives. These questions touch upon different conceptualizations of PD, and it asks for coherence of the selected methods. And we also think that we could use these questions as a frame to design, plan, implement, and report the participatory process. The second point is about how can we reframe participants' roles towards higher levels of involvement. Based on our analysis from these three conceptualizations presented, the most common one is involvement in design activities, which promotes roles that represent lower levels of influence when compared to the other conceptualizations. So just by assuming that participants exercise participation by joining some design activities can result in equating attendance to participation and trick us to promote a passive way of participating. So we need to reflect on these practices and find ways to understand better our participants and make more informed decisions related to which methods and activities to apply, how to share responsibilities with them, and how to achieve a more equal involvement. Finally, there is the matter of evaluating the long-term impact of participation. So empowerment and improving participants' life quality are values and also expected impacts of PD. And in this sense, we only found 12 studies that promote the roles of participants as learners and design or research partners, which are directly related to participants' empowerment. So the latter represents an ethical issue, but also a design issue. Evaluating long-term impact is difficult, but the most relevant point to think about is that if we're committing to apply this approach to design, then it's our responsibility as researchers to understand how the design outcome is improving the life quality of the participants and how available the interventions, products, or services that are being developed will be for the participants. Because we cannot solve everything with participatory design, but definitely we cannot end up creating more barriers to less privileged groups by creating products or services that they won't be able to access. Thank you.